Mike grabbed Lizzie by the hair and pressed her against the damp, dirty, soot-covered wall. It smelled the mold. "You've been a very bad girl and you deserve to be punished," he growled in her ear. Lizzie felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Mike, the huge quarterback of the school team, 6 feet 6 inches tall, tore her away from the wall and pinned her back to the bars, holding his hand over her chest near her neck. They were completely alone in the old abandoned prison. The night filled every corner of the old building with darkness. Mike moved closer to Lizzie. "Now you'll see what's waiting for you," he whispered hoarsely, unbuckling his belt with one hand and pressing down on Lizzie with the other. She suddenly felt something sharp, like a nail or a spike, digging into her back. "Ow, damn, there's something sharp here," she screamed. Mike got scared and jumped back. "Where? What? Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," he fussed. "Damn, I knew we shouldn't have done this here." "Oh, don't worry," Lizzie felt the bars. "Ah, here, the rod is cut in half and the metal sticks out like a splinter." Mike continued to worry. "Listen, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I should have checked beforehand to make sure everything was safe." Lizzie sighed. "Yeah, whatever, let's go back to the camp," she said. "The mood is gone anyway." "Yeah, let's go," Mike agreed quickly. "Do you want me to make you some tea?" Lizzie sighed irritably again. "No, thanks," she poked the wall with her finger. "But it's strange, why close the prison? The walls are still strong." "Well, you see," Mike perked up. "It was after the Vietnam War, the primaries were coming up and the federal government needed to cut costs urgently, and you know that federal subsidies in the penitentiary sector are regulated by the Judiciary Committee, which was controlled by the Democrats, while the Budget Committee was headed by an outspoken Republican, and then there was a hearing on." Lizzie sighed again. For a moment she wanted to just punch Mike in the face to shut him up. They walked along the corridor of the prison, abandoned after a terrible fire. Among the burnt remains of things, there was various garbage. Mike kept talking, Lizzie kicked pebbles out of boredom. She was interested to hear how they clattered on the stone floor. At least it was more interesting than listening to Mike's nagging. She kicked a pebble that flew into one of the cells, almost completely hidden by the darkness. There was no sound, but Lizzie didn't pay attention and the young couple just walked on. They reached the exit. Mike gave Lizzie his hand to help her step over the fallen piece of concrete. They were too far away to hear the stone that Lizzie threw 4 minutes ago roll out of the cell in the dark. It seemed like the darkness in that cell was ready to acquire some tangible outlines. The teens got out of the prison and walked through the woods. In the distance they could see the lights, the laughter of their classmates, and the guitar playing. When they got to the camp, Joe, who also played on the football team, nodded to Mike. Mike felt uncomfortable again and offered Lizzie one of the sandwiches that his mom had given him. Lizzie just waved him off. She wanted to drink and she knew who had the booze. She got a little pleasure from Joe's phrase, addressed to his friend, which she caught out of the corner of her ear. "Mike, looks like you didn't impress her." Mike frowned and muttered something in response. Mr. Jarkin, the school teacher who agreed to take the graduating class of Franklin High School to this strange camping site, came out to the center of the camp. He was a skinny man of indeterminate age, with a perpetual silly smile on his face, wearing pants a size too big and a plaid shirt that probably dated back to the 50s. Someone even joked that they were inherited from his father. But there were advantages to everything. The students had smuggled a ton of alcohol and drugs past this simpleton and could do whatever they wanted. And no cops. It took a couple of hours to get to the campsite. Mr. Jarkin raised a glass of soda. "Guys. Boys and girls, and how do you say, and the rest of you, whoever you are, I don't know, God, this is fashionable now. Burn, Mr. Jarkin." Someone shouted from behind the tents, openly mocking the teacher. Mr. Jarkin smiled and raised his glass higher. "I want to say that you are awesome. It was such a creative idea to come to this campsite. Although we never found out who threw the note with this idea into the suggestion box, but still, you are all very brave. Although it's creepy here. Well, grow some balls," one of the boys said under his breath. The teacher ignored him, just raising his hand with the glass higher. then let's drink to your courage. Hey, Lizzie, I hope you're following the rules and you have lemonade there? Lizzie, who had already had a lot, sang in a loud drunken voice, of course, look, more lemonade. Then she squeezed a lime into her tequila and drank it in one gulp. Everyone laughed. Mr. Jarkin nodded, muttered something and went into his tent. The campsite plunged into celebration. Low clouds ran across the sky. Behind the trees, there was a field, and behind it the remains of the prison, like the skeleton of a ship thrown by a storm. Mike didn't like drinking much, but he was upset about the situation with Lizzie, and even more so about how it would affect his reputation. He sat and watched the fire. Mr. Jarkin sat down next to him and handed him a bottle of beer. Mike looked at him in surprise. "Don't worry, I won't tell, no one will tell anyone anything," Mr. Jarkin winked. His pupils were almost in his entire eyes. "You screwed up, but it happens to everyone. We are judged by our last deeds, so if you made a mistake somewhere, just try again," but with knowledge of the matter, Mr. Jarkin winked, patted him on the shoulder and left. Did he sign up for the gym? Mike thought, surprised by Mr. Jarkin's strength, but only said an indefinite out loud. The party noise began to subside. Either the fresh air, or the fatigue, or the unfamiliar environment, or maybe some other reason, the kids gradually quieted down, and some were already going to bed. Something clicked inside Mike, as if some fuse had been turned off. He went to Lizzie's tent, along the way slapping Joe on the shoulder, who was sitting near his tent. Joe didn't react at all, just sat and stared somewhere between the trees. He's already high, Mike thought, and therefore didn't notice that Joe was staring at a lone figure walking across the moonlit field towards the prison. The figure had an unusually long dark shadow that seemed to go all the way to the prison and seemed to drag the figure into the building eye chain. It was unusually quiet. Mike burst into Lizzie's tent, who was watching some kind of reality show on her phone. "Let's go." Mike tried to give his voice the most rude and decisive intonation. "Okay," Lizzie smiled and threw away the phone. "It's still a recording, there's no connection here." Mike shook her hand and pulled her towards nature. "Whoa, easy cowboy," Lizzie mumbled, a blush spreading across her cheeks. "Shut up and do what I say, otherwise you will regret it." Mike looked at her from under his brows and suddenly dragged her into the ruins again. "Wow, this is an alpha. I can't stand it." "I love your strong arms and ass," Lizzie chirped, not suspecting what was waiting for her inside. Mike pushed Lizzie into one of the cells and tore off his t-shirt, exposing the definition of his muscles. Lizzie froze with her mouth wide open. Mike roughly pulled her hands behind her back and tied them tightly to the bars with his t-shirt. Then Mike tore off her blouse and put his hand around her neck. The frozen face of the sky, the moon made its way through the hole in the wall and silvered its snow-white lid. Lizzie just wanted to whisper, "Come on," when a ringing sound was heard from behind Mike. Someone hit the bars with a baton. The young people both froze. Mike peered into the darkness, trying to understand what that sound was. He clenched his fists. Lizzie blinked her eyes in confusion. It sounded like someone was moving along the cells with a baton and hitting the bars. It was moving towards him, and moving quickly. Suddenly there was a sharp silence. A pebble rolled out of the darkness, the same one that Lizzie kicked into the camera last time, and stopped at Lizzie's shoe. Something suddenly grabbed Mike and threw him in the opposite direction from Lizzie into the second row of the cells. Lizzie heard the crunch of bones and Mike's mad scream. Lizzie thought she could see Mike's arms twisted in a knot around the bars, and white bones peeking out from his body, the same knot he had tied her with his t-shirt. Lizzie began screaming and trying to escape in panic. The knot was difficult, but gave in. Mike continued to scream in pain, but when his knees twisted in the opposite direction, he simply passed out and lay on the floor like a rag doll. Finally, Lizzie managed to escape. Half naked, she ran out of prison and saw a horrifying picture. All her classmates were laid out in a circle in the prison yard. In the center of the circle from their bodies there was some kind of stone. A fire was burning on it. It looked like they were either so drunk or unconscious, or, "What are you doing here?" She heard a stern cry. It was Mr. Jarkin. He was shirtless, beads of sweat glistening under the moonlight on his lean, wiry, trained body. Mike, there. God, what's going on here? Lizzie began to back away. The teacher slowly approached her, almost silently, and gently touched her chin with his finger. Dot hasn't been here for a long time, my dear. Mr. Jarkin's hand sprang, grasping Lizzie's jaw as firmly as if she had fallen into a bear trap. A stone of pain lodged in her throat. With his other hand, he threw her towards the fire with such force that she heard something crunch in her leg. She saw that some symbols were drawn in blood on the faces of her classmates. Sobbing, she tried to understand what was happening, but because of the alcohol, her brain refused to think. Lizzie was floundering in the mud and just thinking about crawling away somewhere. She couldn't feel her leg. Although, in some ways you were right. You will have another master. Mr. Senior Warden. As I understand it, Mike is already getting to know him, and in the future he will be prisoner number 1. Lizzie heard the heavy tread of the teacher approaching her. She tried to crawl away in hysterics, but her hands refused to obey. He grabbed her by the hair and lifted her off the ground, bringing her to his eye level. Lizzie cried and covered her face with her hands. Please, please, was all she could get out. Listen here, you scum. Mr. Jarkin's lip and eye twitched. My father was the senior warden in this prison for 30 years and I will not leave him without a job. He shook her in the air. You're guilty, and you know you've been a bad girl, he smiled wryly. You will have time to think about this. You will have an eternity. His gaze went somewhere behind her, to where the entrance to the prison building was. The darkness trembled and wriggled in the doorway. Yes, father, as you say, said Mr. Jarkin and grabbed Lizzie by the throat. Her vision darkened and she passed out. The next morning, the students woke up in their tents. Everyone had a terrible hangover. Smiling and slouching, Mr. Jarkin served chicken soup to everyone, pleasing and oblivious to the occasional ridicule. Where are Mike and Lizzie? Asked Joe. Mr. Jarkin, have you seen them? You know, dear Joe, Mr. Jarkin made a thoughtful face. It seems to me that everything worked out between them. Oh yes, they've been looking at each other like that for a year now, if you know what I mean. Well, we're adults, he playfully nudged Joe. He grimaced. Well, they left on their own this morning, you know. I tried to dissuade them, but they said that being locked up can always turn gray, but traveling isn't always possible. Ah, the teacher laughed and slapped his knee. Brilliant joke, Joe quipped. Yeah, you'll understand it later, Joe, Mr. Jarkin licked his bitten lips. In short, they left. They kind of wanted to go to the Grand Canyon, but then they decided to go to Aruba. They're on their honeymoon. Oh, I can imagine how their parents would be mad, but I was going to quit anyway. My work here is over, so. Yeah, that's for the best, Joe muttered. His head ached from a hangover. Of course, Mr. Jarkin was fired and was never seen again. Mike and Lizzie were never found, and neither were their cars. They were declared missing. Parents did not give up hope that it was all just youth rebellion, love and a thirst for adventure. A month later, Joe hanged himself for no apparent reason. A month later, one girl drowned in the pool. No one understood how this could happen. Then the two guys quarreled and shot each other. Another classmate, already in college, choked on her breakfast. Then there were several more overdoses and a couple of guys. One victim of a store robbery. 2 accidents. The last guy was found 2 kilometers from that same abandoned prison. There were no signs of violence, just a cardiac arrest. Besides the location, the victim's pose was also strange, on his knees, with his arms crossed behind him, as if he were a prisoner in a ghostly prison. The horrific events of this story began with a familiar phrase, "Hello, miss. I'm Bob, the waiter. I see you are new to our town. Welcome to Ashwood. What can I bring you?" Anna smiled back and said, "Hi, Bob. I'm Lisa. I actually grew up here before moving to the city, so I'm almost a local. I visit my parents every weekend. I just don't always come to see you. What do you have for dinner?" Bob handed her the menu and said with a pleasant, friendly smile, "We have roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, and apple pie. Help yourself. Everything is fresh and homemade. I hope you will enjoy. How's Jersey?" By the way, you look a lot like actress Brie Larson. Thank you, Bob. I do look like her. Jersey is great, a very nice city. It snowed there too. I'm finishing college there and now I have an assignment for my journalism course to conduct an investigation. Oh, and what kind of investigation are you conducting? Bob asked with a smile. You could investigate me. He winked. Anna smiled mysteriously, maybe later, but first. About 5 years ago, a boy, a student, disappeared here. Do you know anything about this? Bob pursed his lips. No, he turned around and quickly left. Another waiter brought Anna's food. Anna thought it was rude and left a $1 tip. Anna left the diner and got into her car. The snow had already stopped falling. It was time to get to work. Anna adjusted the large spider brooch. She always wore it and associated her work as a journalist with a spider that listens to every web. She drove through the town. All the people were minding their own business, but they did everything with tension. There were no smiles on the gray faces. Anna went to Ashwood Elementary School, hoping one of the teachers could tell her more. She was greeted by closed doors and a huge lock on them. There was no sign. Anna stood in front of the door and suddenly she realized during her entire trip she had not seen a single child. Weird. Of course, she doesn't come every weekend, but at the beginning of fall she definitely remembers children playing in the park. Suddenly she saw some movement in one of the windows. She walked around the building. The back entrance was open. Anna walked through the empty school, her steps echoing loudly in the dark hallway. A voice was heard in one of the classrooms. Maybe there are still some children left? A thought flashed through Anna's mind. She entered the room. An elderly teacher stood near the blackboard and talked about symbolism in the works of Shakespeare. There was no one in the class. Instead of children at their desks, there were poorly made dolls with painted faces. It was so scary that Anna was taken aback. The teacher didn't seem to notice her. You better leave, a voice was heard from behind. Anna turned around. It was a girl of 20 to 22 years old. What's going on here? Anna asked. Go away, the girl yelled. Leave my mom alone. Anna decided to leave. Quietly, as she walked along the hallway, she turned into the teacher's room and saw a list of students pinned on the board, participating in some kind of field trip. Anna quickly tore it off and went outside. The cool air gradually brought her to her senses and she realized that she could safely get behind the wheel. Anna decided to visit some of the families whose children had disappeared. She hoped to find some clues or leads for her investigation, but she had a list of names and addresses from the school. She drove to the first house on the list. It was a modest bungalow with a well-kept lawn and a swing set in the backyard. She knocked on the door and waited. A woman opened the door. She looked tired and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Hello, ma'am. I'm Anna, a journalist from Jersey. I'm here to ask you some questions about your son, Kevin. He was one of the students who went missing some time ago. May I come in? Anna said, flashing her fake press ID. The woman stared at her blankly. Kevin? Who's Kevin? She asked. Anna was taken aback. She managed to look around the living room and pointed to a photograph of a child on the wall. Anna showed her a photo of Kevin, a blond boy with a bright smile. This is Kevin, your son. He was in the 5th grade at Ashwood Elementary School. He disappeared. Don't you remember him? Anna said, trying to sound sympathetic. The woman shook her head. No, I don't have a son. I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave me alone. She slammed the door in Anna's face. Are there any children left in your city at all? Anna asked through the door. In response, she heard only muffled sobs. Anna was puzzled. She checked the address again. It was the right one. She looked at the swing set in the backyard. It was covered with snow and dust. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. She decided to try another house. She drove to the second house on the list. It was a 2-story brick house with a garage and a basketball hoop. She knocked on the door and waited. A man opened the door. He looked fit and healthy, with a friendly smile. "Hello, sir. I'm Anna, a journalist from Jersey. I'm here to ask you some questions about your daughter, Amy. She was one of the students who went missing some time ago. May I come in?" Anna said, repeating her introduction. The man nodded. "Sure, come on in. I'm John, Amy's dad. I'm glad you're here. I've been waiting for someone to help me find her. She's been gone for too long," he said, inviting her inside. Anna was surprised. She followed him into the living room. She saw a photo of Amy, a brunette girl with glasses and braces. She looked like a typical nerd. She was holding a trophy and a medal. "This is Amy, my daughter. She is in the 5th grade at Ashwood Elementary School. She is a genius. She won the regional spelling bee and the math Olympiad. We play hide and seek, and I can't find her anywhere. She hid herself so well. She's so smart. I've searched the whole house, but I can't find her anywhere. Hide and seek is her favorite game, and she is very good at it. Have you ever played hide and seek? Can you help me find her? I've been looking for her for a while. It's like she vanished into thin air," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Anna felt sorry for him. He seemed to be in denial. She decided to ask him some more questions. "Sir, I'm sorry for your hide-and-seek game. I know how hard it must be. But I need to know some details. When was the last time you saw Amy? What did she wear? Did she have any friends? Did she have any enemies? Did she have any hobbies? Did she have any secrets?" Anna said, taking out her notebook and pen. John looked at her with a hopeful expression. "You really want to help me find her? You're not like the others?" he asked. Anna nodded. "Yes, sir. I really want to help you. I'm not like the others. I'm here to find the truth. Please tell me everything you know," she said, lying through her teeth. John smiled. "Thank you, Anna. Thank you for caring. You're a good person. I'll tell you everything I know. Maybe you can find something that the others missed. Maybe you can bring my Amy back to me," he said, wiping his eyes. "Do you know if there are still children left in the city?" Anna asked. There was silence. But wait, a guess lit up John's face. He crept up to the refrigerator and opened it sharply. It was empty, except for an overturned bottle of beer and an iron, which for some reason was also there. The man turned to Anna with a sad face. "No, she's not here either." Then he seemed to resign himself. "But she's so smart, she hid herself so well that I couldn't find her." He approached Anna. "You'll help me look, right?" "Of course, you will help me search." A knife appeared in his hands from somewhere. "Help me search." He approached Anna threateningly. Anna, shocked and frightened, stepped back from the door and blurted out, "Of course. I'm already looking. I'll look here." She slammed the door and ran to the car. As Anna ran, she failed to notice how her shoe grazed a frozen plasticine figurine of a spider on the path. Anna drove to the 3rd house on the list. It was a wooden cabin with a porch and a chimney. She knocked on the door and waited. A woman opened the door. She looked old and frail, with white hair and a cane. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Anna, a journalist from Jersey. I'm here to ask you some questions about your grandson, Billy. He was one of the students who went missing. May I come in?" Anna said, using her usual introduction. The woman smiled. "Of course, dear. Come on in. I'm Mary, Billy's grandma. I'm so happy you're here. Billy is here too. He's waiting for you in his room. He's so excited to meet you. He's such a good boy. He's always helping me around the house. He's always reading and learning new things. Mary didn't stop talking for a second as they climbed the stairs to Billy's room. He's always making me laugh. He's always making me proud. He's always making me happy. He's always here. He never left. He never went missing. They entered the nursery, which seemed to have been empty for a very long time. There was an untouched layer of dust on the floor. Mary took a plasticine spider from the shelf by the door and put it in Anna's hands. "Here's my Billy. He never disappeared. He never changed." The old woman began to sway from side to side as if she were reciting a mantra and plunging into a trance. She began to repeat, "He never became a plasticine spider. He never became a plasticine spider. He never became a plasticine spider. He never became a plasticine spider." "Do you know if there are still children left in the city?" Anna asked. Mary suddenly fell silent and looked attentively at Anna. Suddenly the old woman rushed at Anna, shouting, "You fiend! Bring back my grandson!" The old woman grabbed Anna's hair and tried to scratch her face and bite her. Anna pushed the old woman away. She fell, hitting her head on the corner of a small table in the corridor, and fell silent on the floor. "You mad hag!" Anna shouted. "And it serves you right. You are unfit to raise a child." Anna jumped out of the house, got into the car, and exhaled deeply. What a repulsive city. Anna drove back to the diner, hoping to find Bob there. She needed his help to solve the mystery of the missing children. He was the only one who seemed to know something about it. He was the only one who seemed to care about it. He was the only one who seemed to be normal in this town. She parked her car and walked into the diner. She saw Bob behind the counter, serving a customer. He looked up and saw her. He wanted to leave the diner, but Anna stopped him. "Hey, Bob. You know something?" She approached him point blank, almost touching his chest, looking up straight into his eyes. Bob looked back and said, "Okay, blast it," and dragged Anna with him through the service door and into the backyard. Anna continued talking. "I found something horrifying. It makes no sense, but it makes me want to scream. What in the world is happening here?" Bob squatted down, covered his face with his hands. "My sister, my little sister, oh my God." Anna knelt down next to Bob and put her hand on his shoulder. She tried to comfort him. "Bob, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about your sister. What happened to her? Where is she?" she asked. Bob looked up at her with tears in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "She was one of the missing children, Anna. She was one of the kids who went to the old brewery 5 years ago. She never came back. She never came back, Anna. She never came back," he said, sobbing. Anna felt a pang of sympathy for him. She hugged him and said, "I'm so sorry, Bob. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know you had a sister. I didn't know she was gone. I didn't know you were suffering. I didn't know you were alone. I didn't know, Bob. I didn't know," she said, crying with him. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other and crying. They felt a connection, a bond, a spark. They felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. They felt something they needed. They felt something they wanted. They felt something they loved. They slowly got up and wiped their tears. They looked at each other and smiled. They felt a warmth, a comfort, a trust. They felt something they wanted to keep. They felt something they wanted to share. They felt something they wanted to explore. They decided to leave the diner and go somewhere else. Somewhere more private. Somewhere more intimate. Somewhere more safe. They decided to go to a motel. They got into Anna's car and drove away. On the way, Bob accidentally blurted out something that caught Anna's attention. He said, "I just want to protect the last child in town." Anna was shocked. She asked him, "What do you mean, the last child in town? Who is he? Where is he? How do you know him? How do you protect him? What are you hiding, Bob? What are you hiding?" Bob realized his mistake. He regretted his words. Bob tried to change the subject. He said, "Anna, let's not talk about this right now. Let's just enjoy the moment. Let's just be together. Let's just forget about everything else. Let's just go to the motel." Anna was not convinced. She said, "Bob, you can't avoid this. You can't hide this. You can't lie to me. You have to tell me the truth. You have to tell me what you know. You have to tell me who the last child is. You have to tell me where he is. You have to tell me, Bob. You have to tell me." Bob looked out the car window detachedly. Anna exhaled. "Okay, sorry. I just wanted to help. Let's not talk about it." "Thank you," Bob replied. "You know, I also took a cooking class on exotic dishes," said Anna. "Come on," Bob raised an eyebrow. Anna continued seriously, "I can make riz de veau, or whatever it sounds like. Basically, it's a French dish, sweet meat. Have you been to France?" Bob was surprised. "Oh, no, but I'm saving for the trip, and if there's nice company, I'd go," Anna laughed coquettishly. Anna paid for the room in cash. "Oh, God, I really want to take a shower after the trip. Will you rub my back?" she asked playfully, biting a lock of her hair. In the morning they drank coffee at a table by the window. "You are the best of all women," said Bob. "I know," Anna answered with a smile. "I always try more for others than for myself." "Okay, listen," Bob put down his cup and leaned closer to Anna. Extra help won't hurt. Anna listened to Bob and said that she knew what to do and that she would call the right person in Jersey for help. Bob seemed to calm down a little. After he left for work, Anna went to the house of the last child, Timmy, who lived with his grandfather. The door was not open for her, although she heard that there was someone inside. She knocked again and said, "Hello, my name is Anna. I'm Bob's friend." From behind the door came the sound of a pump-action shotgun cocking. Anna decided to retreat as soon as possible. As she was leaving, she saw a little boy in the window of the house on the second floor. "I'll be back," Anna said. Several hours passed. Grandfather came into Timmy's room. He silently watched the boy play, then beckoned him with his hand. "I'm coming, Grandpa," Timmy said. Grandfather continued to silently beckon him with his hand. They went outside. "Grandfather, I can't go out," Timmy said, looking into his grandfather's eyes. He just waved his hand towards the car. If Timmy had been a little older or more attentive, he would have noticed that the garage door was slightly open and a pool of blood was spreading out. Timmy got into the car. Grandfather bent down, left something on the path, and then got behind the wheel. They drove away from the house and Timmy saw that a plasticine spider remained standing on the path. They drove in the direction of the city. Timmy looked in the driver's mirror and saw that his grandfather had no face. He was so scared that he couldn't even scream. Then the grandfather's face changed to the face of the woman who came to ask about the missing children. I think her name was Anna. Then Anna's face went blank again. A thin, pale creature without a face with long arms and legs, a rounded belly and something resembling a spider, was taking poor Timmy to an old brewery that had been abandoned for many years. They stopped in the middle of the yard. The creature in the guise of grandfather opened the doors and ordered Timmy to come out. He flatly refused. The creature began to stretch its pale hands towards the child. The grandfather's face disappeared. Suddenly, a strong blow to the head threw the creature away from the car. It was Bob. "You messed with the wrong guy, you monster," he shouted and began to strike at the creature with a baseball bat. Splashes of blood scattered around. The creature froze. Bob rushed to Timmy. "Are you okay?" Timmy just nodded his head in tears. Bob took a bottle from his backpack with a rag stuck in it instead of a cork and set the rag on fire. Meanwhile, the creature managed to take the form of Anna. "Bob, what are you doing?" she cried. "I just wanted to save the child. It was his grandfather who killed children, so that only his grandson would remain in the whole city." Bob stood over Anna, clutching a flaming Molotov cocktail. Lights danced in his eyes. "Listen," Anna continued. "We can resolve everything. No police. You acted to protect the child, just like me." "Come on." Bob threw the bottle. It burst and Anna was engulfed in flames. Bob silently watched her writhe in the flames and did not take his eyes off the spider brooch. Then he got into the car and drove Timmy to the police station. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat and on the car was Anna's, and Bob was in prison for 25 years. A couple of months later, he was found dead in his cell. The reasons were unknown. The remaining children were never found, although no one filed a complaint. The distraught parents continued to believe their made-up stories. In the end, no one found out what happened here. Everyone considered Bob to have gone mad and made up some story to justify his actions. The sheriff adopted Timmy, although he continued to call him by the name of his missing son, James. Have you ever felt trapped, powerless, and afraid in the face of danger? Jessica had just finished her freshman year of college and was looking forward to celebrating with her classmates at a ranch party. One of the students had invited them to his family's ranch while his parents were out of town for the weekend. It was a warm summer night, June 22nd, 1993, the longest day of the year and the summer solstice. Jessica knew that this date had a special significance for many cultures and religions, especially for the Native Americans who once lived in this area of Nebraska. Some of them still celebrated this day as a time of renewal and balance, but others believed that after this night, the dark forces from the other world would awaken and influence the events of this world. Jessica wondered if there was any truth to these legends, or if they were just superstitions. She arrived with her friend Tris in her pickup truck around 9 p.m. as the sun was setting. The ranch was already buzzing with activity. Some people were grilling burgers, some were setting off fireworks, some were making out behind the old barn. The girls joined the fun, chatting with their friends, flirting with the guys, and taking pictures. Jessica didn't notice anything strange or suspicious until midnight, when she saw something that caught her eye. A little distance from the house, there was a small, unpainted tool shed with a crooked window. She could swear that someone was watching her from inside the dark red-brown shed, which had streaks of paint that contrasted with the old wood. She wanted to tell Tris about it, but then Mike Winston, the most popular guy in school, came over to them. Jessica tried to act cool, but inside she was thrilled. She liked him a lot, and so did Tris. The three of them started talking, Jessica laughing at his lame jokes, but then Mike and Tris went with his friend Bobby, who said he had some candy for fun. Jessica was left alone, and despite the raging fun around her, she felt completely alone and alien, like a soldier returning from war in the middle of a raging circus. All those stupid smiling faces wasting their time and lives. Jessica walked towards that red-brown shed with a detached look. Why was it so underpainted? Why was it so shabby? When she went inside, she saw only dusty tools and several dead rats. She felt disgusted and jumped out of the shed, catching her clothes on a sickle hanging from a chain. She pulled free and felt the sickle scratch her skin. Jessica decided that it was time to leave the party. Tris was nowhere to be seen, and the pickup they came in was hers. Jessica couldn't think of anything better than to just walk along the country road to the highway and hitchhike to the city. She walked under the moon, away from the screams of the crowd, which sounded more and more hysterical and psychotic. The clouds moved quickly under the moon. Jessica woke up in her bed, confused and disoriented. She had a flash of memory of walking through the woods with someone, but then everything faded. She went downstairs, where her stepmother greeted her. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Are you better now?" Jessica nodded. "Yes," the stepmother continued, "it's too bad that you got sick and couldn't go to the party." Jessica was about to protest when there was a knock on the door. It was the police. They came in and started questioning Jessica about Tris, her friends, who she dated and fought with, and whether she was involved in any cults. After a few more questions, one of the officers told Jessica that Tris had been killed that night at the party. A student named Mike was also missing. She tried to ask how it happened, but the police tried to avoid it with the usual confidential investigation excuse, but one of them eventually said that there were so many witnesses at the crime scene that it was useless to try to hide the obvious details. Tris was beheaded with some sharp object, hung upside down on a hook, and then drained of blood. Strange symbols were written around the crime scene. There was no murder weapon. That's how they found her on the farm. The police suspected Mike because he disappeared. His parents had criminal records and he, as a quarterback, would have had the strength to pull off this whole thing. He was also never seen in the local church. You never know what he believes in there. Jessica started to tremble and cry. The stepmother tried to comfort her and asked the police to leave. In the evening, a distraught Jessica decided she couldn't stay at home and decided to meet with her friends. They sat in silence at Bobby's house, shocked by what had happened. Bobby kept saying that Mike couldn't have done this, even being high, and that he was probably a victim too. He was just kidnapped. One girl said the police asked if she saw anyone else at the party. Suddenly Bobby said that many people took pictures and they could look at them to see if they noticed anything. The friends got in the car and visited several local guys who had Polaroids at the party. Looking through the pictures, Jessica couldn't see herself in any of them. Tris was alone everywhere, and then with Mike. It was very strange. Jessica remembered that night well. At some point, she wondered if she had dreamed it all. At night she had nightmares. She painted the shed with blood and talked to Tris' head lying next to her. Scared, exhausted, and on the verge of a breakdown, Jessica went to the police. She wanted to somehow help the investigation and told the officer that she had been to that rancho before and saw a huge sharp sickle in a small, unpainted shed that stood some distance from the house. The officer listened carefully to Jessica and said that she must have been on that rancho a long time ago because there was no such shed there. The officer had photos from the crime scene and they didn't show that small shed. When Jessica left the station, she unbuttoned the top buttons of her blouse and looked at her shoulder. The scratch from the sickle was still there. Shocked and out of touch with reality, Jessica went home and didn't get out of bed until the evening. Part 3. Bobby called Jessica the next day. He said that the police had given up on finding Mike and had put him on the federal wanted list. But Bobby believed that Mike was still alive somewhere and needed their help, so he gathered some friends to search the woods for him. Bobby had a hunch that Mike might be held in an old hunting cabin, which was built on the site of a former Indian village that was burned by Major John Davis in 1855. After that, an oak grove grew there, which was later cut down to make the cabin. Jessica felt a surge of anticipation and excitement. She forgot about her pain and fear, as if they had never existed. She agreed to join Bobby's team and met him at the rendezvous point half an hour later. They walked through the forest, communicating with the other searchers on the radio. Bobby had his father's revolver tucked behind his belt. Jessica walked quietly, but inside she was amazed at her reaction. She felt so thrilled, as if she was starting college for the first time again. Something was waiting for them ahead, and for some reason it made her happy. Maybe justice? At one point, she grabbed Bobby by the sleeve and pulled him to the side, between the hills. Over there, she whispered and pressed her finger to her lips, signaling for silence. Bobby nodded and turned off the radio so that no noise would give them away. They crept between the hills and reached the hunting cabin. The cabin was under a huge oak tree, unlike any Jessica or Bobby had ever seen before. For a second, Jessica was stunned, because it was the same shed with the sickle that she had seen. Part of its wall was shining. As they got closer, they realized it was dried blood. Bobby wanted to turn on the radio to call for help, but Jessica stopped him. Bobby drew his revolver, his hands trembling. They went in. Inside there were shelves with many objects of unknown purpose, feathers, strange stones, bones, but the most horrific thing was Mike nailed to a cross hanging from the far wall. He was dead. On the opposite shelf lay Tris' head. It was such a terrible sight that Bobby started to gag, but despite that, he ran to Mike, trying to untie the ropes. Jessica blinked for a moment and then she saw Bobby's headless body on the floor, and in her hand was the same sickle. She looked at Bobby's body twitching and felt complete calm and peace. She felt a cold breath on her neck and a faint whisper that made her shiver. "Your sacrifices are accepted, sister. We will give you the opportunity to serve us next solstice." The police found Jessica under a massive ancient oak tree when the sun rose. She was smeared with blood, her limbs were scratched and bruised. There was no sign of the hut, only some decayed logs and Bobby's discarded gun. Jessica came to her senses in the hospital. The police and her parents scolded the young people for their recklessness and initiative. It was too dangerous to go into the forest in search of a criminal. They also suspected that Bobby was his accomplice because he had a history of drug abuse. Jessica was lucky that she didn't suffer the same fate as Tris. Jessica cried, nodded, but her night's dream was still vivid in her mind. She covered the logs of the hut with Bobby's blood, feeling a sense of peace and service to something higher. She rubbed each log that absorbed the blood. Maybe it was the revenge of the souls of the murdered Indians, whose land was taken and burned by Major Davis, and whose trees were cut down to make the hut. Or maybe it was some other pagan force that woke up that night. Or maybe Jessica was simply going insane. But she knew one thing for sure: she would wait for the next night by the solstice.